welcome into the Coffee Klatch. This is episode number 2 of our new podcast, and we're going to start doing a more structured program. Today, we're going to have a theme, and today's topic of conversation is the incredible shrinking cake mix. And the reason that I decided to do this particular topic is because I recently purchased a Duncan Hines cookbook. This cookbook, as I was looking through it, has a lot of familiar recipes in it that maybe some of us grew up with, maybe some of us have never heard of, but I bet that in your family lexicon of recipes, there is at least one recipe that requires a cake mix of some sort. Um, I grew up with a mom who did a lot of custom cake making for people that she knew in the community. She was a very experienced cake decorator and baker. I would say that she was a pastry chef without having to go to culinary school. My mom was an amazing cook, an amazing baker, and of course, from her and my grandmothers, that's where I learned my appreciation and skill in the kitchen. But my mom never made a cake from scratch because cake mixes are good quality, pre-measured ingredients. And if you want to make your cake from scratch, that's awesome and you should do it. And I have made plenty of cakes from scratch on my channel. I've made plenty of cakes from scratch in life. But I always go back to my favorite, which is the Duncan Hines cake mix, because I feel like the Duncan Hines mix is like the best quality grocery store cake mix that you can get. That being said, this cookbook was published in 2003. I have a couple of others down here that are cake mix specific cookbooks. Um, I have the Baking with American Dash Duncan Hines cookbook. All of these cookbooks I got off of eBay, by the way. Um, the first one I showed you published in 2003. This one published in 1982. Here I have the Duncan Hines Bake Shop cookbook. This one published in 1979, so a few years earlier than that. And then we have the Complete Cake Mix Magic cookbook from Duncan Hines. And these can all pretty easily be found on eBay. They're not very expensive. I think maybe $4 or $5 each is what I spent on these. But still, they're a great way to research and kind of broaden your recipe collection. And then this one is called the Betty Crocker Ultimate Cake Mix Cookbook, because we can't leave out Betty, right? So this one published in 2002. So we've got 2003, 2002, 2005, 1979, and 1982. All well and good. During those years, the Duncan Hines cake mix and most commercial cake mixes across the board, whether it's Duncan Hines, Betty Crocker, Pillsbury, or whatever brand you prefer, they came in a box that was 18.25 ounces. The cake mixes in these recipes are all relying on the fact that your cake mix is 18.25 ounces. However, I learned, because I did some research, and I asked the internet, are cake mixes the same size today as they were? And I popped in 2003 because I was going through this book. And wouldn't you know it, the answer came back, no, they're not. They're smaller. In fact, they're 3 ounces smaller. And 3 ounces is over a quarter of a cup of mix. That's definitely going to change the way your classic recipe that calls for a cake mix turns out. And if you have experienced this and didn't really know, maybe I did something wrong, maybe the recipe was written down incorrectly, it wasn't you. And it was the manufacturer. Because shrinkflation is real, people. And if you've not figured that out, I don't know where you've been living, hiding under some rock somewhere in a cave, I don't know, but shrinkflation is upon us. And everything is getting smaller while the price is getting, in most cases, higher. And that makes for a very frustrating time with your wallet, but also it happens to be frustrating when it comes to things like recipes that were on the back of the can, on the back of the box, on the back of the bag of major brands. Because I can guarantee you that there is not a brand out there that hasn't reduced its size, whether it's a can of peaches or green beans, a bag of sugar, But nonetheless, baking is a science. And if you want things to come out the right way, then you've got to compensate for that almost third of a cup of mix that they're not giving you anymore. So that is why I chose the topic of conversation today. Shrinkflation. Over the years, many cake mixes have quietly shrunk in size. Recipes in older cookbooks were written for larger boxes, and so today's smaller mixes can throw off that balance. The important part is we can help you fix that. So I'm going to talk to you about, first of all, the two missing cupcakes. Because we have been shorted over a quarter of a cup of mix, about a third of a cup of mix actually, we if you look at the back of the box, it used to tell you, you know, the baking time for the different size pans, 9 by 13, 9-inch rounds, 8-inch rounds, a jelly roll pan, and cupcakes. Cake mixes used to consistently produce 24 cupcakes. Now cake mixes make 22 cupcakes. Can you please explain to me what kind of fresh hell they decided this was a good idea in? Because in no world that I know does any OCD baker want to make 22 cupcakes. I'm not lying, am I? Tell me I'm not the only one who thinks this is just weird and on some corporate level somebody thought it was a great idea. Well, it's not. If I were making cupcakes to take to the Sunday school program at church, and I knew that there were 24 kids that needed a cupcake, I could not rely on the fact that the cake mix would make me exactly the number of cupcakes that I needed. Now, I'm that person who's going to probably make two cake mixes worth of cupcakes because I'm that person, but you're going to have to make 2 boxes anyway now because you won't have enough to begin with. Plus, you want to make sure the pastor and the teachers and whoever get their cupcakes too. I'm hoping that many of you can feel this and understand the frustration. So in any case, the cake mix, in the great vast scheme of things, the cake mix being smaller is not the end of the world. But if you are an avid baker and you have a classic family recipe that requires a cake mix, whether it's that gooey butter cake or the jello cake, or there are so many different. I saw a recipe in one of these books that I must make. It's for German chocolate cake bars, and it starts with a cake mix, but it starts with an 18 1/4 ounce cake mix, not a 15 1/4 ounce cake mix. So there's that. But I'm here to tell you that we can fix all of this, and I'm going to tell you exactly how my mom always made her cake, regardless. My mom made the classic Duncan Hines recipe for it was a pound cake formula. Now, I have actually zhuzhed it up even further. My mom used to go by the box, which was you use whatever it says on the box, plus you add an egg and you add a box of pudding mix. Now, by adding the box of pudding mix, you're virtually rounding out the problem of the missing cake mix. So when you add a box of coordinating pudding that matches the flavor of your cake, for instance, if you want to make a really great, easy pound cake today, you get yourself a yellow cake mix, a box of either vanilla or French vanilla pudding, and then you're going to add, my mom used to add water, a cup of water, a half a cup of oil, and 4 eggs. That was all my mom ever did. Her cakes were great. I've changed my formula a little bit from hers. Now we're going to richen the batter. We're going to, and I'll explain the science behind this a little bit because there are a couple ways you can substitute out for the missing cake mix by adding flour and sugar and baking powder, etc. However, you don't really need to do that at all. I use the cake mix, the 15 1/4 ounce cake mix, a 4 serving size box of instant pudding that matches the flavor. So we're going to use a yellow cake mix, a vanilla or French vanilla pudding mix, instant pudding. Make sure it's instant pudding, not cook and serve pudding, or it will be gummy and gross. I use a cup of milk. Whole milk is best, but if you only have like whatever, if you drink 2% or skim milk, that works too. Or you can use canned milk, like evaporated milk. That works great also. If you keep that on your shelf, wonderful. And you're going to add a cup of it. So that's about a can. There might be a little bit left over. You can just stick that in the fridge and use it in your coffee. Um, and then a stick of butter melted. But then what really helps a lot, and I have found in recent years that the batter tends to come out really, really thick with just those ingredients. And then you're going to have a really, really dense cake. So to help that along and add acidity and moisture, we're going to add a half a cup of either plain yogurt, vanilla yogurt, or sour cream. And if you're like me, you always have sour cream in the fridge. I almost always have like a vanilla yogurt in the fridge for whatever reason. We like yogurt, so we almost always have a big container of that in the fridge. So either way, whatever's close, I'm gonna reach in there and grab it, and I'm just gonna put a big spoonful in there. I usually don't even measure it, to be honest. I just plop it in there. If it looks like about a half a cup, it looks like about a half a cup. You can't mess up a cake mix, I'm here to tell you. And these cookbooks are great references, as well as a set of cookbooks that I love to death called the Cake Mix Doctor. And if you're not familiar with those, I will link them down below because those to me are some of the best cake cookbooks ever. The Cake Mix Doctor, the Cake Mix Doctor Returns, the Cake Mix Doctor chocolate cake mixes. She has so many cookbooks and she's amazing. She also has a blog that you can get on her mailing list, but I digress. My mom's cake recipe, which used to be called, hang on, I have it in my research, just a second. Darn good chocolate cake or pudding cake, is what Duncan Hines used to print the pound cake recipe on the back or the side of their box years ago, but they stopped doing that. Now they refer you to their website. They put this beautiful picture of a cake that you can make using that mix, and then they refer you to the website to go find the recipe. They don't print it on the back of the box anymore, or a brand or whatever. But the research that I did found that they made this change in 2011 across the board. Most cake mix companies, or most companies producing cake mixes, they all changed, and they went to the smaller 15 and a quarter size. Now, what happens when you do that is not only do you have less mix, your cake isn't going to be as high. So not only is the cake mix itself shrinking, your cake is shrinking because it's not going to be as tall as you remember. It's making less cupcakes. And what do we do? It says the historical standard pre-2011, I'm reading directly from my research, was 18 and a quarter ounces. The first reduction happened between 2011 and 2012, and most boxes dropped to 16 and a half ounces. The second reduction happened in the mid 2010s when they settled at the current 15.25 ounces, and some brands like Betty Crocker have recently dropped even further to 13 and a quarter ounces, though Duncan Hines has largely remained 15 and a quarter ounces for its standard lines. So the impact on vintage recipes, because these older cake hack recipes like Jello poke cakes or rum cakes rely on a specific ratio of dry mix to wet ingredients, using a modern 15 and a quarter ounce box can result in a cake that is dense, oily, or doesn't rise enough. And so there are ways that you can fix that, but and I will help you with that. The upsizer recipe would be, you can just make it the way I told you to make it, with the pudding mix, the butter, the milk, and the yogurt or sour cream. It makes a beautiful cake. It makes a beautiful sliceable cake. Whether you do it in a 9 by 13 pan, or you make a layer cake or cupcakes or whatever, it's beautiful. It's like a beautiful pound cake, but it's not heavy. It's cakey and beautiful and bouncy and delicious, and you'll love it. I promise. No one will know that you used a mix, and no one will ask you if you used a mix, because they won't know. They'll never know. If you've ever seen the movie Step Brothers, you'll laugh at that. Anyway, this cake upsizer recipe that I found online works for white, yellow, and chocolate cake mixes without significantly altering the flavor. And I'm just going to read it the way that they said. Was use 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, a cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. You whisk all of those ingredients together. You store them in a clean, dry mason jar or airtight container. You label the jar with the date and keep track of its freshness, and usually lasts up to 6 months. The way you use the upsizer, depending on the size of your cake mix, is for a 15 1/4 ounce box, you would use 6 tablespoons or 3 ounces. And 6 tablespoons is a 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons. So just FYI. And for the 13 1/4 ounce box, you would add 10 tablespoons, which is a 1/2 cup plus 2 tablespoons. And then you would just add that to your cake mix already. Now, the other option for you is to use what we like to call the sacrificial box. Now, if you don't want to go through all the extra ingredients that I mentioned and make my mom's recipe or my altered mom's recipe, you can just go ahead and use the sacrificial box, right? So what you're going to do is what I just said about the upsizer hack. If you don't want to mix up your own, you can just buy an extra box and then add 6 tablespoons to the 15 1/4 ounce box from the other box. Or if your cake mix is the 13 1/4 ounce box, you would add 10 tablespoons or a 1/2 cup plus 2 tablespoons. I know that's a lot of numbers. Trust me, if you've got a vintage recipe that calls for the bigger box, what are you supposed to do? It's not going to turn out exactly the way that you expect it to. And when you're doing your mom's recipe for something or your grandmother's recipe for something and it doesn't come out right, you are disappointed because there's a little part of you that dies when you make a recipe from your childhood that doesn't come out the way you remember it. Trust me, I know. I've been there, done that. But here we are. We're going to fix it right now. I gave you the lowdown. I gave you the timeline. I gave you the skinny on the shrinkflation. I told you my mom's doctored recipe, but how I make it. We talked about the sacrificial box, and now we're going to talk about the science behind my mom's recipe. Less mix equals less structure. The smaller box means that there's less flour and less starch and less leavening agents that lead to a thinner batter and shrinking cakes and uneven baking. So all of those things are important, especially when you're making a vintage recipe. Um, and I feel like anymore, there are so many recipes that we want to make, especially if you're a Gen Xer like me. Our grandmothers were in the kitchen a lot. Our moms were in the kitchen a lot. They were the ones doing the grocery shopping and the menu planning and all the things, right? I grew up in a household where my mom did not leave the house and go to work until I was 16 years old, at which point my brother, who is 5 years my junior, he and I were expected to pitch in and start dinners. That meant that my brother and I were expected to come home from school. We turned into latchkey kids. Now, I mean, being 16 and being a latchkey kid, that's, I think, neither here nor there. But my brother is 5 years younger than me. So that meant he was 11. So we were home together. And all this to say that as a Gen Xer, as I am, when mom was making things and grandma was making things, or in my case, mom and nanny, I don't ever recall my grandmother's using a cake mix at all. My mom, big proponent of the cake mix. And I honestly don't feel like there's anything wrong with it. We don't eat a ton of cake. This is something that sticks in my craw, if I can use an older saying, that manufacturers, I don't feel like they cared when they did this because they didn't care about the recipes that we were used to making. They didn't care about how it was going to affect them. And they just did it. Rick is sitting here saying, it's all about the money. And always follow the money because that's always where you're going to find the answer, especially when it comes to products on the shelf. Can you make your own cake mix? Absolutely, you can. Can you make your own everything? Probably. But do you want to? Probably not. When I say you're going to go buy a cake mix for $1.25 and you're going to add some really great ingredients to it, you're going to come out with a pretty good cake if you know what you're doing. And that's why I wanted to share this today. Shrinkflation is real. It affects us where we are, and it affects us in our wallet, and it affects us in our heart if we make something without understanding the cake mix that we were using is not the cake mix that our mom used, and that is going to throw off the whole thing. But back to the science behind it. So we talked about less mix equals less structure. And then pudding is the answer, really, because pudding is not just adding bulk to your cake mix. Is instant pudding is adding starch. So there's cornstarch in pudding mix as the thickener, or modified food starch, which is also a derivative of corn. That's where the secret lies. Okay, like when I make a cake from scratch, my 1, 2, 3, 4 cake recipe calls for cornstarch and flour. When you make cake flour, or when I need cake flour for a recipe, you would add a tablespoon of cornstarch to every cup of flour that was called for in a recipe. So if my cake recipe called for 2 cups of flour, I would also add 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Now, instant pudding has cornstarch or modified food starch in it, and that's going to help the cake to have moisture and give it structure. It's going to keep it soft and rich, and it's going to give it a buttery style bakery crumb. Um, Adding the butter in place of vegetable oil, it's also going to change the structure of the cake because you're using a whole fat. Now, oil is a fat, but is different from butter. So butter has a protein in it that oil doesn't. So the butter, instead of oil, adds real fat for full flavor and gives tenderness. And just like homemade cakes, now the dairy in place of the water, and also the sour cream or the yogurt, the milk and yogurt or sour cream add moisture, protein, and acidity for a richer texture that lasts. So your cake is actually going to stay nice and soft. It's going to be moist and delicious. It's not going to crumble, and it's going to have great structure because we've got lots of protein in there from the eggs. So we added an extra egg from what the box is telling you to add. We also have added more protein in the form of butter, in the form of dairy, milk, yogurt, or sour cream. And there you have it. It's really a great starter recipe, especially if you're not really used to baking, but you want to make a cake, maybe take it to work or share it with a friend. This is a great way to do it. Now, I have included some other, on this handout, I've included my mom's doctored cake mix recipe from my perspective. I've included instructions about the sacrificial box, the science behind it, and I also included baking times at a glance for pans that include 9 by 13, 8-inch rounds, 9-inch rounds, a bundt pan that's either 10 or 12 cup, 24 cupcakes, a half sheet pan, which is a rimmed half cookie sheet that you would bake for a jelly roll or a Swiss roll cake, as well as a springform pan. Now, I've also included tips for dark or non-stick pans that bake faster. Now, you're going to reduce your baking time on a darker pan always by 3 to 5 minutes, and you're going to want to check it early. And glass pans need longer than metal pans, so 5 to 10 minutes longer. So I have a hard and fast rule that everybody in my house knows, and when you're baking something, the rule is if you can smell it, you should check it. And I feel like that really is a great way to judge how close your cake is to being done. Now, if you can smell it, doesn't necessarily mean your cake is anywhere near done, but it's getting there. It might need 10 or 20 minutes longer, depending on the batter you made, depending on the cake pan you used, and depending on how reliable your oven's temperature setting is. My oven is finicky, and I know that I have to reduce the temperature on my oven to 325 because 325 on my oven is 350. So you always want to be sure and check the temperature on your oven using an oven thermometer, putting it on 350, letting it sit in there in the oven while it's turned on for at least a half an hour after it's been preheated. That way you can see exactly how accurate your oven is. I just thought this was such an important topic. Important in the way that recipes are important. They're pieces of our heart. They really are. We grew up with certain things. We know certain things. We love certain things. And we want to share those things with our family and friends. Like maybe I go to a potluck and I want to say, oh, I want to take my mom's sock it to me cake. There's another really great cake mix recipe, a sock it to me cake which if you've never had a sakatumi cake, leave me a comment down below if you want to see me make a sakatumi cake, because honey, ain't no better breakfast cake. I'm not joking. It's the best cake to take to a brunch or a breakfast potluck, or any potluck really. You don't need an occasion to eat a sakatumi cake. It's delicious. Buttery pound cake with a glaze, and it's got brown sugar, cinnamon, and pecan filling. Remember how you used to get bundt cake mixes like tunnel of fudge, and there used to be a lemon one, and everything you make it, and then it would just bake around that filling, and then there would be this little tunnel in the cake. They don't make those mixes anymore. I don't know why. They don't make a lot of things anymore. There are so many things that I want to revisit on the channel going forward. I just really want to bring back the vintage recipes. I'm going to start a new series. I know I told you that I started a channel called Mid-Century Morsels, but I feel like we're going to launch those recipes over here first. I may just do that channel as shorts, and then we're going to do the long form stuff over here. Because I have so much I want to say. I have so many ideas for podcast episodes that I just really want to address those things, and I'm excited to do it. Now, I feel like I've wrapped up everything I can wrap up about cake mixes, shrinkflation, how we fix it, what we can do moving forward, and, all the options that you have been given to make sure that your mom or your grandmother's recipe that includes a cake mix will turn out right every time. I focused on the Duncan Hines brand because that is really the only brand of cake mix that I have ever or will ever use. Cake mixes are not that expensive, but it depends on where you buy them. Now, Duncan Hines they have their regular line, which is like yellow, devil's food, white, but then they have their signature line, which includes things like, I always use a pineapple cake mix for my pineapple upside down cake. They have spice cake, coconut cake. I think that their marble cake is also part of their signature line, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure. But they also do strawberry. They do several flavors of cake mix. They do orange. The one thing that they no longer do, which really dismays me because I absolutely love a cherry cake. You can't get a cherry cake mix anymore, and that's fine because you can just turn a white cake mix into a cherry cake. All the things I'm mentioning here, I'm going to try and link down below just so you can see the videos. And then we're going to start up our mid-century modern kind of vintage recipe collection of things that I have been wanting to share for many years. I have podcast topics that I want to do. Mid-century modern is coming, series, videos, recipes galore from my vintage cookbook collection, and I can't wait to share those things with you. That being said, it's a good way to segue into my next topic. I did make a post yesterday on the community page as well as Instagram and Facebook. If you're not following me on those platforms, why not? Please come on over, hit the subscribe button or the follow button or whatever the button is called wherever you are. I also have started TikTok, and I am probably repeating myself on all these platforms, but not everybody uses every single platform. So just come follow me wherever it is you love to follow people. My long form stuff is probably always going to live here on YouTube and maybe on Facebook because I can upload longer things there. Short form stuff definitely on Facebook, shorts on YouTube, short form on TikTok and Instagram definitely. And we'll just move on from there. Now that I'm feeling so much better and I'm moving around so much easier, um, things are looking up in the Noreen's Kitchen universe. We did start our Quiet Cup channel last week. We did 5 days worth of devotionals. We're going to be doing them every day, Monday through Friday. So I hope you'll join me if you need a little spirit-filled uplifting at the beginning, middle, or end of your day. Join me whenever you have 5 minutes to sit quietly and sip a drink and just take in what I'm going to share with you. I've had good response, but we would always love to welcome in more subscribers. So please be sure and check that out. I'll leave a link for that down below. And as far as Noreen's Kitchen channel goes, I've just yesterday announced that I have opened up and launched our memberships. I'm going to insert the information for you here on the screen, so you can join at the level of your preference. The levels include the coffee table, which is our lower tier. It's $2.99 a month, and you're going to get early access to my videos. You're going to get members only posts, loyalty badges, and emojis. Now, specialty emojis that I've had made up, and loyalty badges, and occasional behind the scenes information and videos. The second tier, which is the core tier, is $4.99 a month. You're going to get everything from the first tier, and you're going to also get included monthly printable downloads. And with that being said, if you would like to have access to this printable that I created regarding this podcast, I'm going to be giving you this for free. And if you join, when you join the recipe box tier for $4.99 a month, you're going to get that printable for, for your own use. You can print it out, you can laminate it, you can keep it in your cookbook, you can keep it on your phone, and you're going to also get at least one or two exclusive recipes every month from my vintage recipe collection, as well as bonus Coffee Klatch content and member shoutouts in videos. And our higher tier, which is the Vintage Pantry, $7.99 a month. You're going to get everything from the first two tiers, as well as a quarterly mini cookbook themed bundle and occasional members only videos and priority member shoutouts. Everybody's going to get priority response to comments, and you're going to be recognized as a channel member with the loyalty badge that I mentioned earlier. I would like to keep in mind that I do want to start doing live streams, and we will do that once we reach a certain goal for our Vintage Pantry members. So if you want to participate in live streams, go ahead and join the Vintage Pantry level, where you'll have access to all of the benefits of being a channel member. Being a channel member helps to keep the channel running, and it helps me to be able to benefit from knowing what you all want, who is really interested in participating, and giving you the recognition that you deserve, because so many of you have been with me for so many years. I think it's time that we have our core group. And if you want to be a part of that, then please come and join me on the channel memberships. They're not that expensive. I know that everybody has their own budget, and if you can't afford it, I completely understand. And I hope that someday you'll be able to remedy that, and if you want to, if it's something you find value in, to please come over and join the channel memberships. So if you join at the second tier level, then you'll be able to get the handout that I created with all of the tips, tricks, and information about how to fix your cake mix. And my recipe for a delicious pound cake version of a cake mix, as well as everything we talked about today. I promised last week that I would have some videos up on this channel, and I didn't, because I am honestly still getting into a rhythm and getting back into my work mindset, if that makes any sense. I really was concentrating on the Quiet Cup episodes this week. Next week will be different. I do still have some things on the back burner that I really, really want to do videos of. And then I think we're going to also start maybe doing like revisiting recipes that I've done in the past, but upgrading the videos, because some of my videos are really old and the quality is just not there. So I think it's time to give them a little, you know, glam up. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Coffee Klatch. I really am so glad that you did. And I hope that the next time we come around that you fill your cup and you come and join me. So until next time, I'll see ya.